It's hard to overstate just how important this game was back in 1990. First of all, Tim Burton's Batman was one of the most successful movies of its time, and basically kick-started the comic book movie craze of the 90s. Sunsoft had previously released Batman on the NES, which was a fantastic game that pretty much cemented the company's reputation for quality titles in North America. Batman on the Mega Drive is a completely different beast. Rather than the platform-heavy NES game, the Mega Drive version is a much more straightforward brawler with some side-scrolling shooter levels thrown in for good measure. It also follows the plot of the movie much more closely than the Nintendo game. This is one of the things I really loved about the 90s. Sunsoft produced 4 games based on Tim Burton's film for 4 different consoles: the NES, the Mega Drive, the PC Engine, and the Game Boy, and all of them are completely different from one another. The PC Engine game in particular is a strange sort of overhead action puzzle hybrid. The Mega Drive version looks and plays great, though it's a bit on the short and easy side. I honestly prefer the NES game. But it was awesome that this was basically an original game that took advantage of the hardware rather than a half-baked port of the 8-bit version. The reason Batman on the Mega Drive is important, though, is that it was one of the highest profile victims of Nintendo's ridiculous licensing restrictions. Because Nintendo required 2-year exclusivity on all games from third-party publishers in North America, there was very little chance Batman was ever going to hit the Genesis in something resembling a timely manner. There was a bit of a groundswell happening at the time, though. Nintendo and its old nemesis Atari Games, better known as Tengen, were knee-deep in litigation during 1990, and the Federal Trade Commission was sniffing around, preparing to bring Nintendo up on antitrust charges over allegations that the company was threatening retailers with reduced stock
if they were to carry unlicensed NES games or drop their prices by as little as 6 cents. Rumors at the time strongly suggested that Atari Games were the ones making the noise that resulted in the FTC taking a closer look at the Japanese video game giant.
The tide of public opinion was slowly turning on Nintendo. The letters section of game magazines at the time featured lots of complaints about price fixing, Nintendo's scare tactics with retailers, and the negative effect it had on companies like NEC, Sega, and Tengen, and so on. Batman became one of the focal points of the whole situation. The games press rallied around it as an example of the type of quality games Nintendo's restrictions were robbing us of, pushing its readers to import the game because Nintendo had made sure we'd most likely never see it here. Electronic Gaming Monthly actually ran a contest giving away copies of the import. This sort of press went on for months until, in October 1990, Nintendo quietly announced that it was easing up on some of its more restrictive rules surrounding third-party publishers. One of these was lifting the 2-year exclusivity clause. Nintendo claimed at the time that this had nothing to do with the anti-monopoly case brought against it, but the timing suggests otherwise. And so, Batman finally hit the Genesis about 6 months later, yet another example of a shift in power in the US market. And yeah, the game wasn't too shabby either. Quick side note, Tengen was a subsidiary of Atari Games, which was run at the time by Hide Nakajima, who came into that position because he bought out Namco's US subsidiary from Masaya Nakamura. Nakamura, you'll remember, is the man who attempted to sue Nintendo over their monopoly in Japan.
Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays kids more worried